Maybe you've healed the wound, but you still bleed every time you remember it. It no longer appears on the skin, but the soul still contracts in silence. You even say that everything is fine, that you got over it. But inside, something still calls you back to the place of pain. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." But what if you close the wound too soon? What if, in your rush to stop the bleeding, you also block the light from entering? Many people talk about healing, about overcoming the past, about leaving behind those who hurt you. But no one talks about the pain that continues after the wound seems to have closed, about that strange emptiness that appears when everything should be fine, about the silence that still echoes, even when the storm has passed. Maybe you're feeling this right now. You tried to be strong, you tried to move on. You did everything you could to not remember anymore, but it still hurts. There is still a point inside you that reacts, that tightens, that burns, even when no one else sees. And this pain, as invisible as it is persistent, is not a sign of weakness. She is the echo of something deeper, of a truth that may have been silenced, of a soul that still tries to be heard. You are not alone. Many carry this spiritual pain hidden behind smiles. This pain that doesn't bleed but suffocates, that doesn't scream but exhausts. The pain of having been through everything and still feeling it. And then you ask yourself, if I've already forgiven, why does it still hurt? If I've already moved away, why does he still appear in my thoughts? If I already understood everything, why do I still feel lost? The answer may not lie in logic, not even in the time that has passed, but rather in the part of your soul that was stuck at the exact moment you tried to heal yourself. Have you healed the pain, or just locked it away in a dark room inside yourself? Did you want to stop suffering so much that you ended up suffocating what still needed to be heard? Rumi also said, you have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. And maybe you stopped halfway through the process. Perhaps you confuse survival with healing, silence with peace, distance with release. But there is a difference between closing the wound and healing the soul. There is a difference between moving on and truly letting go. And that's what we're going to talk about here. About the pain that remained after the pain. About the weight that is still there even after goodbye. About how the soul keeps everything that was not felt and transforms it into subtle symptoms. Emotional fatigue, blockages in relationships, a feeling of always being incomplete. You feel this because your soul is still trying to show you something you may have ignored, out of fear, out of protection, out of the sheer need to keep breathing. But now, it's time to look at this, truly, with courage, with presence, because the wound has already passed. But pain still wants to teach you something, and when you finally stop running from her, maybe you'll discover that what hurts is precisely what can set you free. And that's when everything starts to change, because most people don't realize this. They think pain is a sign of relapse. That still feeling means being weak. But what if it's just the opposite? What if still feeling is a sign that you are alive and ready to truly heal? There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It only manifests itself as absence. You don't feel angry anymore. He no longer feels like going back, but he doesn't feel peace either. This is the invisible pain. The pain of what was emotionally interrupted, of words that were not said, of swallowed tears, of forced endings. And when this happens, the soul tries to compensate. She starts to project. You give too much of yourself to people who don't reciprocate. You give in too quickly, hoping to feel something you never received. Or you close yourself off completely, afraid of reliving what you couldn't even understand. And the worst part? You think you are cured, because you don't think about him as much anymore, because he doesn't suffer like before. But there is still a weight, an absence of real joy, a distrust of everything, as if something had died inside you, and no one had noticed. Have you ever felt this? Comment below with sincerity. I feel this invisible pain. Your sharing could be the beginning of someone's liberation. It could be the mirror that another soul needed to see itself. And if this content has already touched a point within you, if something here made sense in a way you can't explain, leave your like right now. This shows the universe that this message needs to reach more people. And if this isn't your first wound, if you feel like you are on a deeper spiritual healing journey, subscribe to the channel. This journey is just beginning, and you don't have to do it alone. In the next moment, let's dive even deeper. Why does this pain persist even after so long? What is the spiritual root of all this? Stay with me. Because the soul wants to talk to you. Have you ever felt like you've gotten over someone, but the emptiness still haunts you at night? Have you ever experienced that strange peace that's actually just an uncomfortable silence? Maybe you've closed the loop with words, with distance, with time, but inside, there's still something pulsing. As if the wound has healed on the outside, but inside, it continues to cry out for air, for a voice, for release. Maybe what you healed was your body. The tears dried, the thoughts subsided, the days went on, but your soul still screams silently, a pain no one sees, a scream you learned to silence because you needed to keep going, you needed to move forward, you needed to prove, even to yourself, that you could get back up. But now, with time, you begin to realize it wasn't just about the other person, it wasn't just about the relationship, the abandonment, what they said or didn't say. It's about what's been trapped inside you, about the part of you still waiting to be heard. It's about what you had to silence to keep from falling apart. And that pain, it doesn't just disappear with time. It transforms. It hides in details. It manifests itself in your current relationships, in the fear of trust, in the need to protect yourself constantly. You no longer cry for them, but you feel an inexplicable tightness when someone walks away. You no longer think about the past, but you have difficulty surrendering to the present. You no longer miss them, but feel an emptiness. And this emptiness, however subtle it may seem, is what hurts the most, because it has no name, it has no shape, it has no face, but it carries weight. And this is where many people get lost, thinking they're cured just because they've stopped suffering. But true healing isn't the absence of pain, it's the presence of the soul. It's when you can look at yourself without avoiding it. It's when silence no longer scares you. It's when you can remember without bleeding. But getting to that place takes courage. It takes stopping running. It takes sitting with the pain and asking, what still needs to be heard in me? And that question is scary, because maybe the answer brings tears. Maybe it brings memories. Maybe it brings a reunion with parts of yourself you'd rather forget. But this is true emotional and spiritual healing. Reunion, reintegration, acceptance of everything you felt, just the way you felt it, without judgment, without rushing, without pressure, because what your soul needs most right now isn't for you to speed up the process. It's for you to allow yourself to be whole, even if for a few days that means being vulnerable, being silent, being on pause. Rumi said, "Don't move as fear moves you, move as love calls you." But it's hard to hear that call when we're still stuck in unresolved pain, when there are still layers and layers of ignored feelings, when we still wear armor to keep from being hurt again. And the truth is, these armors no longer protect us. They distance us from love, from surrender, from our own soul. You may have gotten over the person, but maybe you haven't yet gotten over what you've become because of them. And that's why emptiness appears when no one's looking. That's why even on your best days, there's always a haze at the bottom of your joy. It's not sadness, it's not depression, it's an absence, the absence of yourself. And this is only resolved when you choose to return. Return to yourself. Return to the wound, not with the intention of reopening it, but with the willingness to hear what it still holds. Because every recurring pain is trying to tell you something you haven't yet wanted or been able to understand. And life, it continues to bring you experiences that press this point, because that's where a key still lies, a secret, a liberation waiting to happen. So instead of running away from the emptiness, sit with it, listen, breathe, let it tell you what you haven't wanted to feel yet. Because sometimes, what you call a relapse is just your soul trying to complete the healing cycle that was left incomplete. And when you accept feeling, even when you're afraid, something changes. Something begins to loosen. Not all at once, not dramatically, but subtly, like opening a window after a long time, like breathing again. And in this process, it's common to feel confused, to think you're regressing, to think something is wrong, but it's not. What you're experiencing is profound. It's spiritual. It's silent. And that's why it's so powerful. The silence of the soul is an absence. It's presence. It's sacred. It's where true transformation begins. You can try to distract yourself, occupy yourself, deceive yourself. But the soul knows. It always knows. And when it asks to be heard, there's no point in resisting, because the pain you avoid now will return later, stronger, and everything you repress grows. It grows inside, until the day you can no longer pretend everything is okay. That's why today, here, now, I invite you to do something different, to not run, to not try to appear strong, to simply stay. Stay with yourself. Stay with what still hurts. Stay with what still beats. Stay with your soul. And if, at any point in this video, you felt that it spoke directly to you, I want you to write in the comments now. The silence of my soul still asks for healing. This simple phrase could be the beginning of something new, something real, something yours. You think you've moved on. Time has passed, conversations have ceased, names have been silenced, memories have been hidden away in some drawer inside you that you rarely open. You've rebuilt your routine, replaced it with other commitments, and filled the silences with activities. You even smile, even love again, even sleep better some nights. But all it takes is a word, a smell, a song, a phrase uttered in the middle of a random conversation, and everything crumbles inside. As if your body were living in the present, but your soul was still trapped in a past that insists on echoing. This is where the invisible problem lies, the one no one sees, the one you yourself hide, and not out of weakness, but out of instinct, out of exhaustion, out of a need to survive. You've created a narrative for yourself. I've already forgiven. I've already gotten over it. I've already understood everything. But the body doesn't lie. The heart doesn't lie. And the soul even less so. The pain still shows in the details, in the way you protect yourself when someone gets too close, in the way you react intensely when you feel ignored, in the fears that prevent you from trusting, in the silences you prefer to maintain just to avoid the risk of getting hurt again. The truth is, there's a big difference between forgiving with the mind and forgiving with the heart. The mind understands. It rationalizes, creates meaning, justifies, accepts the facts. But the heart, it doesn't feed on logic. It feeds on presence, on truth, on welcomed emotion. And often what you call forgiveness is just an emotional shortcut you've built to avoid feeling pain. But this shortcut comes at a price, because what isn't digested remains. What isn't dealt with repeats, and what is silenced returns. You may have said, I don't hold a grudge, but you still feel a sense of pain. You may have said, it was better this way, but you still dream of what could have been. You may have convinced yourself you've learned, but you still repeat the same pattern in other stories. And all of this isn't a sign that you're behind, or that you're weak. It's a sign that there's an unheard pain, a layer of your wound that hasn't been touched, a part of your soul still waiting to be freed. This invisible pain doesn't show up in tests. It doesn't translate into diagnoses, but it consumes you. It consumes your energy, your spontaneity, your lightness. It's that unexplained emotional exhaustion, that anguish upon waking, that feeling of always waiting for something that never arrives, of always trying to prove your worth so as not to be discarded again. This pain comes from the unsaid, the unfelt, the unfinished. It arises at the exact point where you said, I'm already fine, when in fact, you weren't yet. And the world applauds this kind of strength. The world encourages you to get up quickly, to keep moving forward, to not look back. But what if true healing isn't in moving forward, but in returning to yourself, returning to the point of pain, not to wallow in it, but to truly move through it? Because as long as you avoid looking at what you truly felt, you become a prisoner of an invisible cycle. You live different stories with the same underlying pain. You change faces, scenarios, intentions, but you continue to feel the same abandonment, the same worthlessness, the same loneliness. Rumi said, you have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. And maybe that's what's happening to you. Maybe it's not a relapse. Maybe it's just another layer of healing emerging, because the soul heals in a spiral. First, it heals the superficial. Then, it reveals what's still left. And with each turn you take, you encounter a deeper part of yourself, truer, more real. And this process takes time. It takes presence. It takes stopping pretending everything is okay when it isn't. It takes abandoning the strong persona to embrace the wounded woman who still lives within you. Because being wounded isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of humanity. It's a sign that you loved, that you gave yourself, that you felt, and feeling is what connects us to our souls. You no longer need to deny what you feel, nor force yourself to accelerate something that is still in internal motion. The soul's time is not the time of the clock, and often, what we call stagnation is simply the silence necessary for something profound to transform. But this only happens when you decide to look courageously, to look sincerely, to look without judgment, not to relive the pain, but to free what's still trapped within it. Because unhealed pain becomes armor. And the armor that protects you today may be the same one that prevents you from feeling love tomorrow. So, if you've realized you still carry this kind of pain, the kind that can't be seen, that can't be explained, that no one understands, know that it's legitimate. It's yours, and it deserves to be heard, because when you listen to your pain with compassion, you begin to heal it with truth. And maybe, just maybe, you're here right now for that very reason. Because your soul brought you to this video, to this conversation, to this moment. Not to hurt you again, but to remind you that there's still something sacred inside you begging for space. Something that can no longer be ignored. Something that needs to be felt. If this content resonated with you, I invite you to write in the comments, "I'm ready to feel what still hurts." This phrase can be your bridge to a new level of healing. It can be the beginning of reconnecting with parts of yourself that have been waiting for exactly this. Permission, Rumi says. You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. And as painful as that phrase may seem, perhaps it's the only real path to healing that isn't superficial. Because what you feel now, this pain that still insists on appearing even after so long, may no longer come from the wound itself, but from what you've built around it. Maybe what really hurts today is the armor you had to create to avoid feeling pain anymore. You think the pain is gone, that the trauma has passed, that chapter of your story is closed. But what remains, often, is no longer the event itself, but rather its reflection in your soul. The fear of opening up again, the fear of trusting, the constant vigilance to avoid leaving yourself vulnerable. All of this is a protection system your soul built, not out of weakness, but for survival. And now, even though you're safe, even though time has passed, this armor remains active. It continues to tighten. It continues to prevent you from surrendering yourself completely. And therein lies the spiritual root of your suffering. It's no longer about the other person, nor about what happened, nor about what they said or didn't say. It's about you, about the way your soul still carries fear as a shield. The way you've emotionally shielded yourself so you don't have to relive what hurt so much back then. But protecting yourself too much is also a kind of prison. The same armor that saved you now prevents you from feeling. It prevents love from entering. It prevents Rumi's light from penetrating the scar. And this is where most people lose their way. They think they're evolving because they don't feel as much as they used to. But in reality, they're just avoiding it. They're keeping everything under control. And the soul, unlike the mind, doesn't want control. It wants flow. It wants surrender. It wants truth. And that's why the pain persists. Because as long as there is resistance, there will be suffering. You might even say you're fine, that you're at peace, that you don't want to think about it anymore. But when life brings you a new love, a new chance, a new connection, you freeze, you retreat, you over-rationalize. You look for danger signs where there are none. These are all symptoms of the armor that's still in place, an emotional and spiritual armor made of memories, fears, and self-protection. And this structure, however subtle it may seem, weighs you down. It takes away your lightness, your spontaneity, your ability to trust the unseen. Rumi didn't just speak of heartbreak in the romantic sense. He spoke of the heart as the center of the soul, as the place where truth resides. And breaking the heart until it cracks open is an invitation to strip away defenses, to let light enter where pain has created cracks. Because while you try to keep everything under control, you also keep healing outside. There's a point within you that needs to be accessed not with force, but with surrender. A point where your wounded child still lives in fear of being unloved, where your adult woman still carries the weight of having been invisible so many times. This point won't be reached with haste nor with quick personal development techniques. It only reveals itself when you decide to stop, when you take a deep breath and ask yourself, which part of me still lives in defense? It's at this moment that the soul begins to respond. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And if you remain silent long enough, you'll hear it. You'll realize that the pain that still pulsates is the call to allow yourself to feel everything that's accumulated. Because healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about accepting everything it brought, including the defenses you had to create. And maybe that's why you're still stuck in an emotional cycle that seems never ending. Because deep down, it's not about repeating stories. It's about repeating reactions. You can change places, partners, routines, but if the armor remains the same, the results will remain the same. Because the problem is no longer external. It's internal. It's spiritual. It's in the way you've learned to protect yourself from life, and at the same time prevent yourself from living it fully. And all of this, when not looked at deeply, turns into silent suffering. You start to get used to so-so, to lukewarm relationships, to gray days, to an existence that doesn't hurt as much, but doesn't delight either. You start to numb yourself, and this emotional numbness is dangerous, because it doesn't kill you all at once. It gradually erases parts of you, your faith, your intuition, your surrender, your truth. But there is another way, a way to traverse this inner territory without destroying yourself, to recognize the armor and be grateful for it, but no longer live under its command, to look at pain with eyes of love, to stop running from what deep down only wants to be embraced. Rumi also said, don't settle for stories that keep you small, and maybe you've done just that, told yourself internal stories that keep you stuck in the past, stories that you're hard to love, that no one stays, that it's better not to feel too much so as not to suffer again. But the truth is, these stories aren't yours. They were created from pain, and all pain, when left unprocessed, turns into a narrative you repeat so you don't have to look at what you really feel. But now, perhaps for the first time in a long time, you can choose something else. You can choose to let go. You can choose to let your guard down. You can choose to feel it, not as a threat, but as a reconnection with your essence. And if this touched a deep place within you, if this speech resonated with your soul, if you feel that there really is a spiritual armor that needs to be dissolved, I invite you to write in the comments, I'm ready to take off my armor. This simple phrase can be the first step towards your soul breathing without defenses for the first time in a long time. What no one told you is that healing isn't forgetting. Healing isn't erasing. Healing isn't pretending nothing happened or that nothing marked you. Truly healing is being able to remember without bleeding. It's being able to look at the wound and see a scar, not a gaping wound. It's revisiting the past and feeling compassion, not pain. It's taking a deep breath in the face of memories and not being overwhelmed by that tightness that once left you feeling grounded. But this is only possible when you stop resisting. Because unhealed pain doesn't just scream because it exists. It screams because it's being denied. Pain only remains when there's something still being resisted internally, something you didn't want to feel, something you ignored, something you controlled to keep from falling apart. And the soul senses this. The soul knows when you're trying to overcome what needs to be overcome. And herein lies the hidden key to spiritual healing. Acceptance. Not the mental acceptance that says, it's all right, I've learned from this, but real, raw, living acceptance. The kind that allows you to sit with what still hurts and say, I'm here with you. I won't run away anymore. It's at that moment that something inside begins to change. Because pain, when embraced, begins to dissolve. When you stop fighting what you feel stops hurting you. Maybe you tried to move on by ignoring parts of yourself that still cried out for care. Maybe you forced yourself to smile when you still wanted to cry. Maybe you tried to be strong when your soul cried out for rest. And all of this wasn't in vain. It was what you managed to do to survive. But now that survival is no longer necessary, your soul wants truth. And the truth is there are parts of you waiting for permission. Permission to feel. Permission to say, this hurt me. Permission to admit it still hurts. Because only when you allow yourself to feel do you allow yourself to heal. And healing in this sense is a silent process. It's like slowly melting a wall of ice. Each layer of pain that disappears makes room for a new layer of presence. of lightness, of wholeness. And this doesn't happen in a rush, nor with ready-made formulas. The key to spiritual healing is allowing the pain to speak. Let the pain move. Let the pain pass through you like a storm that clears the sky, and not like a poison that paralyzes you. The problem is that we were taught to resist, to swallow our tears, to smile to disguise it, to carry on even when everything inside called for a pause. And this became an automatic way of living. But the soul doesn't function on automatism. It demands listening. It demands a pause. It demands surrender. And this surrender requires courage. Courage to stop pretending everything is okay. Courage to admit that there's a pain that still throbs even when no one sees. Courage to let the heart speak even if the voice is choked. Rumi said that the remedy for pain is in the pain. And that's something almost no one wants to hear, because it's much easier to look for external solutions, distractions, and justifications. But no distraction will touch what only your presence can heal. No quick fix will reach the depths of something that was formed in the soul. And that's why the healing process requires inward reflection. It requires silence. It requires honesty with yourself. When you allow yourself to look with compassion at what hurt, you regain the power that was lost in the moment of pain. Because pain, when it happens, isn't just an emotional impact. It's a break in your connection with yourself. You abandon yourself to endure. You disconnect to avoid feeling so much. And this disconnection becomes the greatest harm. Much more than what the person did to you. It's what you had to do to yourself to endure that becomes the real burden. And now you're here, perhaps realizing that there are still parts of you that have been left behind. Parts that have closed themselves off. Parts that have gone silent. Parts that have shrunk. And these parts won't go away just because you've decided to be strong. They'll go away when they're seen, when they're heard, when they're loved. The key to healing, therefore, is not in resisting, but in allowing. It is not in forgetting, but in integrating. It is not in moving forward as if nothing happened, but in walking with the wisdom of what happened. Because you are not the pain. You are the one who survived it. And now you can choose to be more than a survivor. You can be whole again. And maybe, just maybe, everything you've experienced so far has been the exact path your soul needed to reach this moment. This point in the journey where, instead of fighting the pain, you begin to walk with it, not as an enemy, but as a messenger, because the pain that insists on remaining is trying to show you something that's still hidden, something that can only be accessed when you stop resisting. And at this point in the journey, there's no escape. There's only the path back to you, and that path may be silent, slow, challenging, but it's the only one that leads to true liberation. Pain no longer wants to hurt you. It wants to reveal you, to reveal the strength that was hidden, to reveal the wisdom born in chaos, to reveal the light that only shines in the darkness. If something in this video made sense to you, if you feel that there is still something inside you that resists, that hides, that cries out for healing, I invite you to leave the following sentence in the comments. I accept remembering without bleeding, because only those who allow themselves to remember are able to finally free themselves. Maybe you've moved on from that relationship. Maybe you've closed all the doors, deleted the photos, blocked the number, stopped waiting for messages. Maybe you've even told yourself and others that it's okay, that you now understand it was for the best, that it needed to end. But deep down, when night falls and silence sets in, something still echoes. It's no longer him. It's no longer his face, his presence, or the specific memories. What still hurts is what was imprinted on you. The way you were ignored, how you were left behind, as if your love had been too small to be seen, as if you were invisible even though you gave your all. This feeling of not being seen is a much deeper wound than most people realize, because we're not just talking about physical absence or common rejection. We're talking about emotional erasure. When you were there, whole, present, available, and yet you were treated as if you didn't exist. When you loved silently, intensely, and surrenderedly, and all you received in return was indifference. This pain doesn't fade with time. It doesn't disappear just because you rationalize the end. It remains where the soul was wounded, in the space where you learned you needed to do more, be more, give more, to perhaps deserve to be loved, and you still carry that, even without realizing it. It shows up with every new relationship attempt, When you feel like you have to constantly prove yourself. When you worry too much about not bothering others. When you diminish yourself to fit other people's expectations. When you feel like any flaw of yours will be reason enough to be discarded. All of this is the echo of that unvalidated wound. The pain of not having been enough. The pain of not being seen, even though you've shown your full self. And this pain isn't just relational. It becomes existential. It begins to infiltrate other areas of your life. You begin to doubt yourself, your worth, your ability to be loved without having to try so hard. And this exhausts you. It drains you emotionally because you're always operating in compensation mode, trying to offer more than you receive, trying to anticipate what the other person wants so as not to risk being rejected again. And deep down, this constant attempt at control only reveals how much that wound remains raw. You say you don't think about him anymore, but you feel easily affected when anyone ignores you. You say you're at peace, but as soon as someone steps away, the fear resurfaces. Because it was never just about him. It's about what this experience triggered in you. The pain of not being chosen, of not being a priority, of being left as a last option while you did everything to be first. And this keeps repeating itself. You enter new relationships but carry the same wounded soul. You try to protect yourself but end up sabotaging yourself. You try to surrender, but fear speaks louder. And all of this happens because that part of you that was ignored still cries out for validation. It still longs to be accepted. It still needs to be heard. And until that happens, your soul continues to relive the same story with different characters. There's no point in changing the scenario if the pain remains the same. There's no point in saying you've overcome it if you still react with pain to even small absences, because it's not the present that's hurting. It's the past that hasn't been resolved yet. It's the wounded child who learned that to be loved, they had to be perfect, that to be seen, they had to disappear, that to be accepted, they had to be silent. You may not realize it, but today you still relate to the world through this wound. You keep quiet when you want to speak. You say okay when you're not. You accept less than you deserve just to avoid appearing demanding. And all of this because, deep down, there's still a part of you that believes you're not enough as you are. And this is where true transformation begins. When you understand that the pain is no longer in the other person. It's no longer in the story you've lived through. It's in the way your soul absorbed it all. It's in the identity you built from rejection. It's in the way you learned not to listen to yourself, not to honor yourself, not to prioritize yourself, because you've grown accustomed to not being a priority for anyone, not even yourself. But what if you could start doing things differently now? What if you could look at this part of yourself through the eyes of truth? What if you could embrace your own pain like someone embracing a frightened child? What if you could, for the first time, say to yourself, I see you. I know it hurt. I know you just wanted to be loved. This internal listening is what begins to dissolve the weight of abandonment. Because it's not about convincing the other person to see you. It's about you deciding to see yourself. It's about you breaking the cycle of ignoring yourself because you were ignored. And maybe you're still afraid to open up again. To trust again, to surrender again, and that's okay. No one is asking you to run, just to look, to approach yourself gently, to touch with presence the parts you've tried to hide for so long. Because as long as you run away from yourself, you'll continue to attract relationships that only confirm your absence. But when you choose to truly see yourself, the world begins to see you too. And it doesn't have to be all at once. It doesn't have to be intense. It just has to be true. Because the soul doesn't need to rush. It just needs space. And in this silent space, everything begins to reorganize itself. You begin to breathe differently, to look at your story with new eyes, and to feel, perhaps for the first time, that what once hurt so much can now be transformed into wisdom. If you felt that this example spoke to you, if at any point in your life you felt invisible even though you loved with all your strength, I invite you to write in the comments, I deserve to be truly seen, because this simple statement, when it comes from the soul, has the power to open doors that have been closed for a long time. You are not the pain. No matter how intense it was, no matter how violently, silently, or continuously it tore through you, no matter how much it marked days, nights, and years of your life, you are not the pain. You are the one who survived it, the one who got out of bed even when it seemed impossible. The one who silenced the cries in the middle of the night just to be able to work the next day. The one who, even filled with internal fragments, held their own soul in their hands and carried on, even without knowing how, even without understanding why. And this survival has a name: spiritual strength. It is the strength of the soul that decides to carry on even when everything falls apart. It is the silent wisdom that lives within you, even when your mind doubts your ability. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend." And this awakening doesn't happen in a magical moment, nor with an external miracle. This awakening begins now, when you understand that your story doesn't need to be determined by the pain you've experienced, that your worth isn't limited to what others did to you, that your soul is greater than all the losses, rejections, abandonments, and absences you've experienced. Pain wants to tell you that you're weak, that you're too broken, that too much time has passed. But the truth that lives beyond the pain is much more powerful. You're alive. You're here. And being here, hearing this, feeling this, is already proof that your soul is ready to remember who you are beyond what you've suffered. Pain tries to reduce you, make you forget your essence, but spiritual awareness reconnects you. It shows you that, deep down, you were never what you were led to believe. You are the one who felt, the one who loved, the one who surrendered. And that was never weakness. It was always courage. But for so long you believed the stories written over your wound. Stories that told you you weren't enough, that you needed to conform to be accepted, that you had to keep quiet to maintain love. And these stories became inner truths. You began to identify with them, to live by them, to love by them, to hide within them. And that's understandable, because when pain recurs, we begin to believe it's part of our identity, that there's no longer a me without it. But this is just a cycle, and every cycle can be broken, as long as you're aware. This shift in consciousness begins when you stop asking yourself, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What does my soul want to show me with this?" It's not about romanticizing pain. It's not about saying everything has a beautiful purpose. It's about understanding that if pain has come, it carries a key that can free you from everything that has kept you trapped for so long. But this key only works when you change your perspective, when you take your eyes off the wound and start looking at the woman who emerged from it, the woman who, despite everything, still wants to love, still wants to be loved, still wants to reconnect with her deepest truth, the woman who begins to understand that she no longer needs to mold herself to fit in, that she no longer needs to beg for love, that she no longer needs to punish herself for feeling too much. Pain brought you here, but it doesn't define your destination. It was a journey, not a home. And when you begin to see this, you stop clinging to the stories of the past, because you understand they were chapters, not the whole book, that each page you've lived has something to say, but none of them has the power to define who you are. This shift in consciousness also shows you that forgiveness isn't something you do for others. It's something you do for yourself. Because as long as you're carrying hurt, resentment, and unhealed pain, you're still living as a prisoner of something that's already passed. And you deserve to live free, light, whole, with enough space within yourself to receive everything life still has to offer. But to do that, you need to let go. You need to stop repeating old stories. You need to break with the idea that you'll only be loved if you're perfect, because your soul didn't come here to fit in. It came to expand, to become who you always were, even before all the wounds. This spiritual awareness is like a clean mirror. For the first time, you begin to see yourself clearly, not as someone who was rejected, betrayed, or ignored, but as someone who, even though hurt, remained open-hearted, as someone who continues to believe in love, even after experiencing the opposite, as someone who, amidst the chaos, still carries a spark of faith. This spark is your truth, and it has never been extinguished. It has simply been overshadowed by the stories of pain. But now, in this moment, it can be rekindled, not by someone else, not by an external response, but by you, by your decision to no longer shrink, to no longer hide, to no longer cling to narratives that keep you small, because your soul is calling, and the call is clear. Awaken your own legend, write your own story, heal with your own light. You're not a secondary character in the stories you've lived with others. You are the author of your own journey. And when you understand this, everything changes. You begin to move differently, to choose differently, to relate more truthfully, to listen to yourself more deeply, because now you know pain doesn't define, Pain reveals, and what it reveals is the most sacred part of you. If you felt that this speech touched something deep, if some part of you was awakened while listening to these words, I invite you to write in the comments, "I choose to write a new story." May this choice be the beginning of your own legend, no longer guided by pain but by the light of your soul. The pain that remains is the sacred reminder that you are human, that there is something within you that feels deeply, that is moved, that pulsates, something that is not content with simply surviving, something that still yearns to live with presence, with soul, with truth. This pain that insists on appearing even after the wound has healed is not a mistake. It is not a sign of failure. It is not a symptom that you are behind in the healing process. Quite the opposite. This residual pain is the most honest invitation your soul can offer you. The invitation to stop running away from yourself, because running from pain is, essentially, running from yourself. It's denying parts of yourself that experienced something so intense they couldn't be embraced at that moment. And when you ignore these parts, when you push them deep into your soul and silence them, you divide yourself. You fragment emotionally. And over time, these forgotten pieces begin to cry, not with words, but with feelings, an inexplicable tightness, an emptiness that appears on the best days, a sadness for no apparent reason, a desire to cry even when everything seems right. These subtle signals are the echo of your soul trying to say, "I'm still here." Feeling is part of healing, and not just feeling the pain while it's at its peak, but also feeling what comes after, the remnants, the whispers, the echoes that remain when everything seems to have passed. True healing isn't linear. It's cyclical. It comes in waves. Sometimes it seems like you're doing great, and suddenly, a memory paralyzes you. A gesture affects you. An absence corrodes you. This doesn't mean you're regressing, it means you're going deeper. Deep emotional and spiritual healing doesn't just happen when pain explodes. It happens when you go back and gather the forgotten fragments of your story, when you look at what's left of the storm and realize that there are still parts of you waiting to be embraced. And it's at that moment that you realize you no longer need to force yourself to forget, because forgetting isn't synonymous with healing. Sometimes it's just a way to escape what still needs to be overcome. And here's the most important key. Allow yourself to cross, not to forget, but to free yourself. Crossing is the process of looking deeply at yourself, of being present with everything that still lives within you, with the longing, the fears, the emptiness, the unfulfilled desires. When you allow yourself to feel this without judging, without rushing, without trying to solve it quickly, something begins to dissolve. Pain stops being an enemy. It becomes a teacher. Residual pain is a spiritual messenger. It reminds you that there's still something inside you that hasn't been fully embraced, something you may have learned to ignore to feel accepted, something you buried to appear strong. But now, with greater emotional maturity and a more awakened awareness, you can return to these parts with compassion, without rushing, without guilt, without fear of losing yourself. This pain, however silent, carries a wisdom that no theory can explain. It takes you inward. It takes you to the center of your soul. It forces you to stop living on autopilot and start listening to what truly matters. And often, what it's trying to tell you is, you don't need to protect yourself like this anymore. You don't need to wear that mask anymore. You can be whole, even with the scars. And being whole doesn't mean always being okay. It means being true to what's going on inside you. It means being able to cry without feeling weak. It means being able to say it hurts, even after so long. It means understanding that the soul's time is different from the world's, and that sometimes pain takes years to find its place within you. And that's okay, because what matters isn't speed, it's depth. Rumi said that the wound is the place where the light enters you, but this light doesn't enter all at once. It enters gradually as you make room. And making room in this case means letting go of resistance. It means stopping trying to control what you feel. It means breathing, even when it hurts. It means allowing yourself to fall a little, knowing that falling is also part of the journey. That falling sometimes is necessary to remember where the foundation of your soul lies. This residual pain, when welcomed with presence and love, begins to transform. It ceases to be a burden and begins to be wisdom. It ceases to be a shadow and begins to be an inner light. Because within every pain experienced lies a piece of your truth, a piece of your sensitivity, a piece of your deepest calling. And to deny this is to deny an essential part of your essence. And maybe, just maybe, you're here now, precisely because you're ready. Ready to feel more deeply. Ready to heal with more awareness. Ready to say to yourself, I don't need to run anymore. Because running brought you here. But it's by stopping that you find yourself. It's by sitting with the pain that you reconnect. It's by listening to what still hurts that you begin to hear what truly matters. The voice of your soul. And your soul doesn't want ready-made answers. It doesn't want quick fixes. It wants truth. It wants silence. It wants space to show you everything you've tried to forget. Because there, in that spot you've avoided for so long, lies the gold of your healing. It is the key to your freedom. It is your most sacred reunion. If this passage awakened something in you, if you feel that there is still a pain that has no name, but that accompanies you, even without you completely understanding it, I invite you to write in the comments, I allow pain to transform me. This phrase could be the beginning of a spiritual journey that changes everything. Because pain, when accepted with love, stops hurting and begins to illuminate. If you still feel it, it's because there's something inside you that still demands presence, not haste. There's a part of your soul that doesn't want to be silenced, doesn't want to be pushed into oblivion. It wants to be seen. It wants to be welcomed. It wants to be heard with the same love a weary heart offers itself when it finally decides to stop fighting what it feels. The soul doesn't want to be healed quickly, because true healing isn't a straight line. It's not a goal to be achieved. It's not a destination to be rushed. The soul wants to be heard, and listening to the soul requires time. It requires silence. It requires the courage to not rush, to not run away, to simply stay. For a long time you believed you needed to solve everything quickly. That feeling too much was weakness. That showing vulnerability was dangerous. So you learned to rush through every process, to close cycles, to forgive before truly understanding, to rebuild without looking at the rubble. And the result was a hasty healing, a half healing. You didn't heal, you adjusted. You didn't scar, you hardened. And now life invites you once again to slow down, to understand that what you call pain may just be your soul's cry for attention. Because when the soul is ignored, it begins to speak through symptoms: anxiety, insomnia, constant fatigue, a feeling of emptiness. All of this is the language of the invisible trying to call you back to the essential. The soul has its own rhythm, and it never rushes. It wants you to learn to be with it, to stop rushing toward healing and start walking toward listening. Because it's not speed that transforms, it's presence. The soul heals the moment you decide to be with it, even if it still hurts, even if there's still fear. And this presence isn't something you force, it's something you allow. It's when you say to yourself, I won't rush to stop feeling, I will feel until the pain transforms into wisdom. Rumi said that the wound is where the light enters, and this light doesn't enter quickly. It penetrates gradually as you allow yourself to open, as your heart softens, as the rigidity of your defenses dissolves. What hurts now isn't what hurt you. It's what you keep trying to control. It's the fear of surrendering again, of opening up again, of trusting again. But as long as you live in this state of constant vigilance, the soul will keep trying to get your attention, because it wants to remind you that love only blossoms where there is surrender. And surrender only happens when you stop defending yourself from what no longer threatens you. You've spent so much time trying to protect yourself from pain, but pain is no longer the enemy. Pain is now your guide. It points out what still needs to be embraced, what still needs to be released, what's still trapped in your deepest layers. It doesn't come to punish you. It comes to reveal you. And the more you resist, the more it insists. Not because it wants to see you suffer, but because it wants to see you awake. It wants to see you whole. It wants to see you alive. Haste is the disguise of fear. It's the fear of feeling, the fear of falling apart, the fear of looking at what's been hidden. But every time you try to speed up the process, you move away from the center. And the center of the soul is the place where everything aligns. It's the point where the past stops being wound and becomes strength, where emptiness stops being pain and becomes space for the new, where silence stops being absence and becomes refuge. This place can only be found by those who allow themselves to go slowly. Allowing yourself to go slowly is an act of faith. It's trusting that life knows the right timing for things. It's accepting that the soul doesn't follow the world's calendar. It's understanding that no matter how much the exterior may yield results, The interior only heals in truth, and truth is never rushed. It blossoms at the pace of consciousness, in the time the heart can bear its own depth. Maybe you're right now, tired of running, tired of resisting, tired of trying to understand. Maybe you're beginning to realize that there's nothing wrong with feeling, that there's nothing wrong with still hurting. That pain, in fact, is a reminder that your soul remains alive, sensitive, pulsating, because the total absence of pain isn't peace, it's numbness. And numbness is the opposite of an awakened soul. True peace comes when you accept feeling everything, the light and the heavy, the sweet and the bitter, the healing and the still wounding, because feeling is what connects you to the sacred within. So, if it still hurts, don't run away. If there's still something inside that calls you back to an old place, don't ignore it. This call isn't a regression, it's an alignment. It's your soul asking to be heard. It no longer wants you to run away. It wants you to stop, look, and say, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm not going to rush you. And in that simple gesture, something changes, because the soul, when heard, begins to calm, it begins to breathe, it begins to guide, and you begin to understand that whatever remained of the pain was just a reminder of what still needed to be loved. This is the time to listen, the time to reconnect with your own rhythm, with the sacred compass of your inner healing, the time to stop chasing a perfect version of yourself and begin to inhabit the truth of who you are, now, in this moment. The pain that still exists isn't holding you back, it's guiding you. It's the thread that leads you back to your essence. And when you hold that thread with presence, the path reveals itself. If you felt that these words touched you, if in some way this message resonated within your silence, I invite you to write in the comments, I choose to listen to my soul, because it is in listening that healing begins. It is in presence that the soul blossoms again. If you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me until the end of this video, it's because your soul is asking for more truth, more presence, more healing, and this journey doesn't end now. It's only just beginning. So, if you felt this content spoke to you on some deeper level, I invite you to join me. Subscribe to the channel here. Each video is a safe space for your soul to breathe, remember, and reconnect. It's a journey, and you don't have to do it alone. If this message touched you, leave your like. This helps this content reach other people who also need to hear it. And now, to continue this inner journey, I invite you to watch the next video that's appearing there on the screen. It's the natural continuation of this conversation we had here, because your soul still has a lot to reveal.